What if I told you that 8,000 years ago, mysterious fish-worshipping people along the Danube River were part of a vast network connected to Turkey's world-famous Göbekli Tepe? Now, before anyone gets the wrong idea, let me be crystal clear. I'm not claiming aliens built the pyramids or that Atlantis was real. I'm just a guy pointing at peer-reviewed academic sources and saying, hey, this is pretty weird, right? I'm Alex Arnold, and welcome aboard Arnie's Brain Train, where we like to look at controversial topics through the lens of actual research. And if that offends you, well, sorry, not sorry. Today we're going to explore the shocking connections between Europe's fish people at Lepenski in Serbia and the megalithic builders of Turkey's Göbekli Tepe. Were these ancient peoples part of the same lost civilization? Did survivors of an advanced culture establish outposts across Europe and Turkey, carrying fragments of an ancient knowledge? More provocatively, are we finally uncovering evidence of a prehistoric civilization that mainstream archaeology has been ignoring? All sources for today's deep dive are listed in the description below, so you can fact check everything I'm about to reveal. And fair warning, some of the visuals in this video might be AI generated because, shocking revelation, not everything from 10,000 years ago had professional photographers documenting it. So if this bothers you, good luck on the internet. For everyone else ready for an informational deep dive into some genuinely puzzling archaeological evidence, let's dive in. Here's what makes this story absolutely wild. While most of Europe was still figuring out basic agriculture, two incredibly sophisticated cultures were creating monuments that still baffle archaeologists today. On one side, we have fish-obsessed people carving intricate sculptures along the Danube. On the other, master builders creating massive stone circles that predate Stonehenge by 6,000 years. The timeline is crucial here. Göbekli Tepe was built around 9500 BCE and used until around 8000 BCE. Lepenski flourished from about 9500 to 6000 BCE. That's not just overlap, that's nearly identical timing across a distance of over 600 miles during a period when most humans were still nomadic hunter-gatherers. But here's the kicker. Both cultures show signs of complexity that shouldn't exist according to traditional archaeological timelines. We're talking about advanced astronomy, sophisticated mathematical proportions in their architecture, and religious symbolism that suggests deep philosophical thinking. These weren't people slowly figuring out civilization, they were inheriting it from somewhere else. So buckle up, because we're about to reveal evidence for scattered remains of a lost civilization that conventional archaeology refuses to acknowledge. A prehistoric network that connected Europe's fish people to Turkey's megalithic builders. Let's start with Lepenski Europe's best-kept archaeological secret. Nestled along the Danube River in what's now Serbia, the site was accidentally discovered in 1965 during construction work. What archaeologists found there completely shattered their assumptions about Mesolithic Europe. They found a perfectly planned settlement with sophisticated architecture featuring trapezoidal houses arranged in precise rows. But here's where it gets weird. Almost every building contained elaborate stone sculptures depicting fish-human hybrids. We're talking about over 100 sculptures showing beings with human bodies and fish heads, or fish with distinctly human features. The craftsmanship is stunning. These aren't crude cave paintings or simple carvings. We're looking at sophisticated three-dimensional sculptures that required advanced stoneworking techniques. Some of these fish people sculptures are over 3 feet tall and show incredible attention to anatomical detail. The tools required for this level of craftsmanship, precision stone chisels, polishing implements, measuring devices, suggest a technological sophistication that supposedly didn't exist. But what really blows archaeologists' minds is the site's organization. Lepenski wasn't just a random settlement, it was carefully planned urban architecture. The largest house sits at the center, suggesting social hierarchy. The buildings are oriented toward the river, and the entire site shows evidence of deliberate civic planning that supposedly didn't exist for another 3,000 years. Here's where things get more interesting. The mathematical precision of the site layout suggests knowledge of geometric principles. The buildings follow specific proportional relationships, and the overall plan appears to incorporate astronomical alignments. These peoples weren't just building shelters, they were implementing complex architectural principles that required generations of accumulated knowledge. The people of Lepenski weren't just sophisticated builders, they were part of something bigger. Archaeological evidence shows that they had trade networks extending across the Balkans. They were importing materials and possibly ideas from hundreds of miles away. Obsidian from Hungary, shells from the Mediterranean, amber from the Baltic. We're talking about trade networks that rival medieval Europe. Now let's jump southeast to Turkey and one of archaeology's most controversial sites, Göbekli Tepe. If Lepenski challenges our understanding of European development, Göbekli Tepe completely demolishes our assumptions about early human capability. Supposedly built by hunter-gatherers around 9500 BCE, Göbekli Tepe features massive stone pillars arranged in circles, some weighing up to 20 tons. The pillars are covered with intricate carvings of animals, geometric patterns, and mysterious symbols that we still can't fully decode. We're talking about lions, boars, snakes, birds, and humanoid figures, all carved with incredible artistic skill. Here's what makes mainstream archaeologists so uncomfortable. According to traditional timelines, the people who built Göbekli Tepe shouldn't have had the organizational capacity, social structure, or technical knowledge necessary for such a massive undertaking. Yet somehow they quarried, transported, and erected stones that would challenge modern construction crews. The site consists of at least 20 circular enclosures, though only 4 have been fully excavated. Each enclosure contains T-shaped pillars that clearly represent stylized human figures. You can see arms, hands, and clothing details carved into the stone. Some pillars even have 3-dimensional sculptures of animals protruding from the surfaces. But here's where Göbekli Tepe gets absolutely mind-bending. Recent analysis suggests that the builders had sophisticated knowledge of astronomy. The circular arrangements appear to track celestial movements, and some researchers argue that the site functioned as a prehistoric observatory. We're talking about hunter-gatherers who supposedly spent all their time finding food, somehow developing complex astronomical knowledge that wouldn't be matched for thousands of years. The implications are staggering. If hunter-gatherers could build Göbekli Tepe, coordinate massive construction projects, develop complex astronomical systems, and create sophisticated art, then what we call civilization already existed 11,500 years ago. Everything we've been taught about human development, that complex societies emerged from agriculture, falls apart. Now, you may not think any of this matters, but understanding these ancient connections helps us grasp how human civilization really developed. Not through isolated pockets, but through vast networks of cultural exchange that academic orthodoxy still refuses to fully acknowledge. We're not just talking about history here, we're talking about rediscovering lost human potential. But here's the mystery that keeps archaeologists up at night. Around 8000 BCE, the entire Göbekli Tepe complex was deliberately buried under tons of earth. Not abandoned, but purposely covered up. Someone spent enormous effort hiding this place, and we have no idea why. Unless they knew something that we didn't and wanted to preserve it for the future. Now here's the part that makes some people cringe and academic archaeologists break out in cold sweats. What if Lepenski and Göbekli Tepe weren't independent developments of complex culture? What if they were both remnants, surviving fragments, of a much older, more sophisticated civilization that we've lost to history? Let's consider the evidence. Both sites appear suddenly in the archaeological record with no apparent developmental phase. There's no gradual progression from simple to complex. They both emerge fully formed with advanced techniques and sophisticated knowledge systems. It's like finding a Formula 1 car in a world where everyone else is still figuring out the wheel. This pattern actually repeats across multiple sites from this period. Complex megalithic structures, advanced astronomical knowledge, sophisticated art, and organized societies all appear simultaneously across a vast geographic range. The traditional explanation, that these all developed independently through parallel evolution, stretches credibility to the breaking point. What if there were an earlier civilization, possibly dating back to the end of the last ice age around 12,000 years ago, that possessed advanced knowledge in astronomy, mathematics, architecture, and social organization? What if this civilization was disrupted or destroyed by climate change, catastrophic events, or other factors, leaving only scattered survivor communities carrying fragments of the original knowledge? A scenario like this could definitely explain the sudden appearance of sophisticated cultures like those at Göbekli Tepe and Lepenski. They weren't developing from scratch. They were working from inherited knowledge, trying to reconstruct what their ancestors had achieved. It would also explain why both sites were eventually abandoned. The knowledge base was incomplete, and without the full supporting infrastructure of the original civilization, these outposts couldn't be sustained. The implications are revolutionary. Instead of civilization being a recent development of the last 5,000 years, we might be looking at evidence that advanced human societies existed much earlier, possibly for thousands of years, before being reset by catastrophic events that we're only beginning to understand. Now we get to the real heart of our investigation. Could these two cultures have been connected? Well, let's start with the most obvious link: timing. Both sites were active during the same historical period, roughly 9500 to 8000 BCE. That's not coincidence territory, that's potential causation. During this exact time frame, we see the emergence of complex societies across a wide geographic range, from Turkey through the Balkans and into Central Europe. But here's what's fascinating. This period corresponds exactly with the end of the Younger Dryas, a sudden climate change event that marked the end of the last ice age. Global temperatures rose rapidly, ice sheets melted, sea levels rose dramatically, and entire landscapes were transformed. If there was an earlier advanced civilization, this is exactly when it would have faced its greatest challenge. Recent genetic studies of ancient European populations show significant movement from Anatolia, modern Turkey, into the Balkans during precisely this period. But these weren't random migrations. DNA analysis reveals that the migrants were carrying specific genetic markers associated with technological innovation and cultural sophistication. Archaeological evidence supports this movement. Similar pottery styles, stoneworking techniques, and symbolic motifs appear across sites from Turkey to the Danube basin. But more importantly, the complexity appears first in the east and gradually diminishes as you move west, exactly what you'd expect if knowledge was being transmitted from a source in Anatolia. Consider this scenario. A catastrophic event forces the survivors of an advanced civilization to abandon their original territories and migrate to new lands. They carry with them fragments of their ancestors' knowledge, enough to build impressive monuments and establish sophisticated communities, but not enough to fully recreate their original civilization. The survivors establish outposts like Göbekli Tepe and later Lepenski, trying to preserve and transmit their inherited knowledge. But without the full infrastructure and accumulated wisdom of the original civilization, these outposts gradually decline. Eventually, the knowledge fades, the monuments are abandoned, and later peoples have no memory of what came before. The cultural parallels between these sites are impossible to ignore once you start looking. Both cultures show evidence of complex symbolic thinking that goes far beyond basic survival needs. Both invested enormous resources in creating monuments that served primarily religious or ceremonial purposes. At Göbekli Tepe, we see sophisticated animal symbolism and what appears to be shamanistic imagery. At Lepenski, the fish-human sculptures suggest similar spiritual beliefs involving transformation between human and animal forms. But here's what's really intriguing. Both cultures seem to be depicting the same fundamental concept: the connection between human consciousness and the natural world. The fish-human hybrids of Lepenski and the animal-human transformations depicted at Göbekli Tepe suggest shared mythological or religious traditions. These aren't random artistic choices. They represent sophisticated philosophical concepts about the relationship between humanity and nature that required centuries or millennia to develop. The architectural sophistication is another parallel. Both sites show evidence of careful planning, precise measurements, and advanced construction techniques. Neither represents the work of people just figuring out how to build permanent structures. These are the products of established architectural traditions with deep historical roots. Most intriguingly, both cultures seem to have practiced some form of ancestor worship or memorial rituals. At Lepenski Vir, human burials are integrated directly into the living spaces, with the dead quite literally remaining part of the community. At Göbekli Tepe, the deliberate burial of the entire site suggests that it became a place of memory or commemoration. Once again, this matters because understanding these connections helps us see that human development wasn't linear or isolated. It was a complex web of interactions that created the foundation for everything that followed, including our modern world. But more than that, it suggests that we might be inheritors of knowledge and traditions far older than we realize. But perhaps the most compelling parallel is what happened to both sites. They were both abandoned or transformed around 8000 BCE, right as agriculture began spreading through Europe. This timing suggests that these cultures weren't replaced by more advanced peoples. They were casualties of a changing world that no longer supported their way of life. Now, I know that's still not enough for some of you, so let's go ahead and look at the concrete evidence suggesting that these cultures were connected. First, there's the river route. The Danube river system provides a natural highway from the Black Sea region all the way into Central Europe. For ancient peoples, rivers were the equivalent of modern superhighways, the fastest and most efficient way to move people, goods, and ideas. Archaeological surveys along this river route show a continuous chain of related sites from the Black Sea to the Iron Gates region where Lepenski Vir sits. We're not talking about isolated settlements. We're seeing evidence of a connected cultural network stretching across hundreds of miles, with each site showing progressive adaptation to local conditions while maintaining core cultural elements. The stoneworking techniques show remarkable similarities. Both cultures use sophisticated methods for quarrying, shaping, and positioning large stones. The precision and skill required suggests not just shared knowledge, but shared training traditions passed down through generations of master craftsmen. DNA analysis of ancient remains from both regions show genetic markers indicating population movement from Anatolia into the Balkans during exactly the period when these sites were active. But here's the crucial detail. These weren't desperate refugees. The genetic evidence suggests organized migration of skilled populations carrying advanced cultural knowledge. Recent discoveries have also revealed similar symbolic motifs at sites throughout the region. Spiral patterns, animal imagery, and geometric designs that appear at Göbekli Tepe show up at sites across the Balkans, suggesting a shared symbolic language or religious system that maintained continuity across vast distances. But perhaps the most compelling is the evidence of coordinated abandonment. Multiple sites across this network were abandoned or deliberately buried around the same time period, suggesting a coordinated response to some region-wide crisis or cultural shift. Now, here's where things really get controversial. And remember, on Arnie's Brain Train, we don't care about whose feelings get hurt by inconvenient facts. The mainstream archaeological establishment has been surprisingly resistant to exploring these connections in depth, and there are some very revealing reasons why. First, accepting that Mesolithic Europeans had sophisticated trade networks and shared cultural systems challenges the neat linear progression that dominates archaeological textbooks. It's much easier to teach that civilization developed in isolated pockets that gradually spread, than to acknowledge that our ancestors were part of complex international networks 10,000 years ago. But there's something even deeper at work here. The possibility that these sites represent remnants of an even older, more advanced civilization threatens the entire foundation of how we understand human development. Academic careers, institutional funding, and published theories all depend on maintaining the current timeline of human progress. Some researchers, like Dr. Dragoslav Srejović, who excavated Lepenski Vir, have argued for decades that these sites represent evidence of far more sophisticated prehistoric cultures than traditionally acknowledged. But their work often gets marginalized because it doesn't fit comfortable academic categories. You can't get tenure by suggesting that everything we know about prehistory might be wrong. The resistance isn't just intellectual, it's institutional. Research funding goes to projects that confirm existing theories, not ones that challenge fundamental assumptions about human development. Graduate students learn quickly that questioning established timelines is not the path to academic success. But the evidence keeps mounting. Every new discovery in this region reveals more complexity, more sophistication, and more connections than the traditional models predict. Sites like Bonkuklu, Tarla in Turkey, Navali Chori, and dozens of other sites across the region all show the same pattern: sophisticated cultures appearing suddenly with no apparent developmental phase. The most telling resistance comes when researchers suggest that these sites might represent fragments of a lost civilization. The academic establishment reacts with almost religious fervor to defend the idea that complex civilization is a recent development. They have had too much invested in the current narrative to consider alternatives. But here's what they can't explain away: the mathematical precision of these ancient sites, the sophisticated astronomical alignments, the advanced artistic techniques, and the coordinated cultural networks. These features didn't develop overnight, and they didn't emerge from isolated hunter-gatherer bands figuring things out independently. If Lepenski and Göbekli Tepe were indeed part of a connected cultural network, or more provocatively, if they represent remnants of an older lost civilization, the implications are absolutely huge. We're not just talking about rewriting archaeology textbooks. We're talking about fundamentally reimagining human potential and the trajectory of our species. Think about what this means for our understanding of human development. Instead of civilization being a lucky accident that happened once in Mesopotamia and gradually spread, we might be looking at evidence that complex human societies have existed for much longer periods, possibly rising and falling multiple times throughout prehistory. This connects to a broader pattern that we're seeing in archaeology. Every new discovery pushes back the dates for human sophistication. From Göbekli Tepe to the recently discovered Bonkuklu Tarla site, from the sophisticated cave art of Europe to the complex stone circles of the Sahara before it became a desert. We keep finding evidence that our ancestors were far more capable and connected than previously imagined. The implications continue to extend beyond archaeology into fundamental questions about human nature and potential. If Stone Age peoples could coordinate massive construction projects across vast distances, develop complex astronomical systems, and maintain sophisticated cultural networks, what does this tell us about innate human capabilities that we might have lost or forgotten? It also raises profound questions about cyclical versus linear models of human development. What if human civilization doesn't follow a straight line from primitive to advanced? What if there have been multiple peaks and valleys, with knowledge being lost and rediscovered repeatedly throughout history? Consider the practical aspects. If ancient peoples possessed advanced knowledge of astronomy, mathematics, architecture, and social organization, studying their techniques and approaches might provide insights for solving modern problems. Their methods of coordinating large projects without modern communication technology, their sustainable relationship with their environment, their integration of spiritual and practical knowledge. All of these could inform contemporary challenges. The most unsettling thing of all is what it suggests about the fragility of civilization. If advanced cultures like those at Göbekli Tepe and Lepenski could disappear so completely that we barely recognize their achievements, what does that say about the permanence of our own civilization? Their apparent decline coincides with major climate change, a sobering reminder for our own era. Well, as usual in every episode, let me bring all of this together for you. We started with the simple question: could the fish people of Lepenski be connected to the megalithic builders of Göbekli Tepe? The evidence suggests not just that they could be, but that they probably were, and that both might represent something much bigger than isolated prehistoric cultures. The timeline overlap is too precise to ignore. The geographic route is logical and supported by archaeological evidence. The cultural similarities point to shared knowledge and beliefs. The genetic evidence shows population movement in exactly the right direction at exactly the right time. But more provocatively, both sites show evidence of inherited knowledge systems that appear fully formed without apparent developmental phases. The mathematical precision, astronomical alignments, sophisticated artistic techniques, and complex social organization all suggest that these cultures were working from accumulated knowledge that took millennia to develop. What we might be looking at is evidence for a vast prehistoric cultural network that stretched from Turkey through the Balkans and into Central Europe. This network shared advanced stoneworking techniques, complex religious symbolism, sophisticated astronomical knowledge, and coordinated social organization, all during a period when traditional archaeology claims such things didn't exist. The fish people of Lepenski Vir weren't isolated river dwellers. They were part of an international cultural system that included the master builders of Göbekli Tepe. This network traded not just goods, but ideas, techniques, and accumulated wisdom across vast distances that rival modern trade routes. The deliberate abandonment or burial of both sites around 8000 BCE suggests that they may have been casualties of the end of the last ice age, the final outposts of knowledge systems that couldn't survive the transition to a radically different world. Most importantly, understanding these connections forces us to reconsider human potential and the true antiquity of complex civilization. We might not be the first advanced human culture. We might be inheritors of knowledge and traditions far older than we realize. And that's where we'll pull into the station on today's episode of Arnie's Brain Train. We've examined evidence for connections between Europe's fish people and Turkey's Göbekli Tepe, revealing what might be the scattered remains of a lost prehistoric civilization that predates recorded history. Remember, every single piece of evidence presented today comes from legitimate academic sources, all meticulously listed in the description or the pinned comment below. I encourage you to fact-check everything. Read the original research papers and draw your own conclusions. That's what real inquiry looks like, not blind acceptance of comfortable narratives. If you want to see me tackle more controversial topics that prioritize truth over feelings, subscribe to the channel and help me grow these productions. My videos aren't designed to make everyone comfortable. They're designed to be accurate, evidence-based investigations that follow the data regardless of how inconvenient it might be. Did this episode challenge your assumptions about prehistory? Hit that like button. Have thoughts about these ancient connections or the lost civilization hypothesis? Drop them in the comments. I read every single one and I love debating these ideas with people who can handle uncomfortable evidence. And don't forget to ring that notification bell so you never miss out on our weekly adventures through history's biggest mysteries. Finally, what other ancient mystery should we tackle next? Lost megalithic cultures? The true age of the Sphinx? The mystery of advanced Paleolithic cave art? Let me know in the comments. But until next time, keep questioning everything, and remember, the world isn't always this simple, but it's always this interesting. All aboard. See you guys there. Bye.